The galaxy was wide and full of strange, powerful species. For centuries, the older civilizations had ruled space with pride. They built great cities on distant planets, created laws through the Galactic Council, and believed they understood everything about life. Then one day, a new species arrived. Humans. They came from a small, loud, and wild planet called Earth. To the older races, humans were strange. They laughed too much, talked too fast, and seemed too emotional. Most aliens believed they were weak. They won't survive long in space, some said. They're too soft, too fragile. The Galactic Council allowed Earth to join but expected them to fail quickly. After all, humans had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. What could they possibly offer? But then something happened that no one expected. Humans began visiting planets that were considered deadly, places where no alien had ever survived. These places were called the Dead Worlds. The Council had labeled them dangerous and uninhabitable. Some had gravity so strong it could crush a body in seconds. Others had acid-filled air, endless lightning storms, or temperatures that could melt metal. No living thing had ever made it through a full day on those planets. For aliens, these worlds were death. But the humans didn't fear them. They landed on a planet called Zirion 7, one of the worst dead worlds known. The galaxy watched through live drone footage, expecting the humans to die within minutes. But they didn't. Instead, they stepped out of their ship and started training. They ran across burning rock, climbed cliffs under crushing gravity, and stood tall as acid rain fell from the sky. The galaxy was silent. No one could believe it. The High Speaker of the Vrax Empire gasped when he saw the footage. "How are they alive?" he asked, shocked. On her throne of glass, the Hilari Queen whispered, "They're not just surviving, they're getting stronger." All around the galaxy, alien leaders and scientists were confused. These were planets that had killed every other species. But humans were walking, running, and even laughing on them. No one understood. What were these creatures made of? Some thought it was a trick. Others believed humans had found a way to shield themselves with new technology. But the truth was simpler and scarier. Humans were adapting. Their bodies were learning how to survive in the harshest conditions in the universe. They weren't just visiting the dead worlds. They were using them as training grounds. No other species had ever tried this. Why would they? It was too dangerous, too crazy. But humans had always been different. Back on Earth, they had survived ice ages, deadly animals, and even turned deserts into cities. Struggle had made them stronger. Now they were bringing that same spirit into space. The galaxy, which once saw humans as weak and noisy, began to look at them with fear and awe. No one had trained on the dead worlds before. No one had even tried. But the humans were not like the others. They were not trying to fit into the galaxy's rules. They were writing their own. And as they stood on the burning hills of Zirion 7, smiling through the storm, the galaxy realized one terrible, powerful truth. Humans weren't just here to join the galaxy. They were here to change it. After the humans' shocking success on Zirion 7, the galaxy's eyes turned toward them with a mix of disbelief and fear. The Galactic Council was alarmed. They had never seen anything like this before. The dead worlds were not just dangerous. They were impossible to survive. Yet here were these humans, thriving on the most deadly planets known to existence. What was going on? To understand how humans had managed this feat, the Galactic Council ordered a study. Soon, they learned the humans weren't just surviving. They were training. A new military project, Project Iron Soul, was born. Its goal was simple: to push human soldiers to their absolute limits by sending them to the dead worlds. This wasn't about fighting aliens or building empires. It was about survival. The project began by selecting the best human recruits, soldiers with the strongest bodies and minds. They were sent to worlds like Tartarus 9, a planet with crushing gravity, constant storms, and freezing temperatures. Humans called these places boot camps. On the first day, the recruits were told there would be no help, no rescue teams, no technology to shield them from the environment. They were alone, completely exposed. The mission: survive a full cycle, 300 hours, in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. The recruits were dropped onto the planet, and the clock started. To anyone watching, it seemed like madness. The storms on Tartarus 9 could tear a ship apart, yet the humans were standing, moving, and running. For the first few days, they barely slept. They endured hours of freezing winds, with temperatures falling below 100 degrees Celsius. The gravity was so intense that each step felt like lifting a 100-pound weight. Every movement was exhausting. But the humans weren't giving up. They dug into the harsh ground, built shelters, and fought their way through the storms. They didn't complain, they didn't panic, they just kept moving forward. In the next phase of the training, they learned to fight. The recruits were taught how to handle weapons and hand-to-hand combat in extreme conditions. They practiced using blades in the freezing wind and shooting targets while the ground beneath them shook with violent tremors. One recruit, a young woman named Captain Alara, was sent to Zarian 5, another dead world. It had massive bloodthirsty creatures that roamed the dark caves and forests. There, Alara had to face the most terrifying of creatures alone. The monsters were as big as houses, with claws sharp enough to cut steel. The mission wasn't just to kill them, it was to survive the encounter. Using only her basic training and instincts, Alara outsmarted the beasts and made it back alive. Her body bruised, her armor torn, her story spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Soon, more soldiers were volunteering for the project. They wanted to prove they could do the same. On every dead world, human soldiers faced new and terrifying challenges. The more they trained, the more they seemed to adapt. Their bodies grew stronger, their minds sharper. After months of these deadly tests, it was clear. Humans weren't just surviving. They were evolving. They were becoming something new, something far tougher than anyone could have imagined. They began to laugh at what others feared. Acid storms? We've walked through worse. Supergravity? We've run through that. To the galaxy, it seemed impossible. But to the humans, it was just another day at the training ground. Soon these soldiers returned home, their bodies conditioned for battle in the harshest conditions. They had become Ironborn, the toughest warriors the galaxy had ever seen. Alien leaders, once confident in their superiority, now began to wonder. What happens if these humans decide to fight us? The galaxy had underestimated them before. Now, it was beginning to realize how dangerous they could become. As humans continued to train on the dead worlds, their reputations spread across the galaxy like wildfire. No one could ignore them anymore. The alien species that once saw them as weak and unimportant now found themselves deeply concerned. The Galactic Council, which had already been hesitant to let Earth join their ranks, could no longer ignore the fact that humans were quickly becoming a powerful force. In secret meetings, alien leaders discussed the humans' sudden rise. Some felt a sense of fear, while others felt anger at the idea that this small, chaotic species was challenging everything they knew about strength. "This is a threat," the Vrax High Speaker declared during one of the Council's emergency sessions. "These humans have no limits. They don't break. Their bodies adapt too quickly." There was no denying it anymore. The human survival on the dead worlds was not a fluke. It was part of their design. The more they trained, the more they seemed to evolve. They grew faster, stronger, and more resilient. Their soldiers became legends across the galaxy, their names whispered in fear and respect. What began as a series of tests had transformed into a new kind of warrior, one who could thrive in conditions that would kill any other species. This change alarmed the galaxy's leaders. The Vrax Empire, known for their brutal strength, the Halari, masters of psychic energy, and the Zelra, warriors who could breathe in the vacuum of space, were all in agreement. Humans were becoming too powerful. Their soldiers, known as Ironborn, were nearly impossible to stop. The galaxy's power balance was in danger. To put an end to this rising threat, the Council called for an urgent vote. Some argued that humans should be banned from training on the dead worlds. Others suggested imposing strict limitations on their technology and resources. But these plans were met with resistance. The human leaders, led by General Larkin, rejected the idea of being controlled. "We don't need your permission," Larkin said firmly. "We're not afraid of you, and we never will be." In fact, the humans weren't concerned about fitting into the Council's rules at all. They had their own path. They had already begun colonizing some of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Where other species saw death, humans saw opportunity. On worlds like Volcanus Prime and Dreadstorm 12, they built training bases. They built entire cities where no other species dared to live. And as they continued to push the limits of what they could endure, the galaxy watched in a mixture of awe and fear. The Galactic Council was faced with a difficult decision. They had already seen the strength and resilience of the humans, but now it was clear that the humans were becoming more than just a military force. They were becoming a new kind of power in the galaxy. If they didn't act soon, the humans might not only change the balance of power, they might rule it. Still, even as the Council debated, there was one question no one could answer. What exactly was happening to these humans? Their strength was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Their ability to adapt to extreme environments seemed almost unnatural. Some began to speculate that the humans weren't just training. They were evolving in real time. They weren't just surviving the dead worlds. They were turning the impossible into the possible. And as each new human recruit returned from these brutal planets stronger and more powerful, the galaxy knew one thing for sure. They could no longer ignore humans. The question wasn't whether humans could survive. The question was, what would happen if they decided to fight? The Ironborn were no longer a group of soldiers. They were becoming an unstoppable force, and that was something the galaxy had never seen before. As the humans continued to strengthen their presence across the galaxy's most powerful empires and alliances found themselves at a crossroads. The Vrax Empire, with its unstoppable war machines, and the Halari, with their telepathic powers, were now beginning to fear the humans more than they had ever feared any species before. The humans had not just survived the dead worlds, they had turned them into their playgrounds. Their training, which had started as a strange experiment, had now become a terrifying reality. The Ironborn, the human soldiers who had been forged on these deadly planets, were unlike any warriors the galaxy had ever seen. They were faster, stronger, and more adaptable than anyone had imagined. But there was one problem that the galaxy's leaders had overlooked in their haste to try to stop humanity's rise. Humans didn't just adapt to their environments, they thrived in them. While the Council debated how to limit humanity's growing power, the humans, under the leadership of General Larkin, were quietly making their next move. They began to build an army. This army wasn't just for defense or peacekeeping. It was an army for conquest. They called it the Starlight Legion, an elite force of Ironborn who had been trained in every possible kind of extreme environment. Their mission was clear: to take back what humanity had always felt belonged to them. The Starlight Legion was sent to the planets that other species considered off-limits. They conquered volatile worlds like Oblivion's Edge, a planet constantly bombarded by asteroid strikes and Frostspire, a freezing world where every breath froze instantly. The humans didn't just conquer these places, they turned them into thriving, functional worlds. They began to reshape these deadly planets into resource-rich powerhouses. But as the Starlight Legion expanded, the galaxy's powers began to feel the pressure. The Vrax Empire, which had once ruled the stars through fear and overwhelming force, was now faced with a species that didn't rely on fear, but instead on raw determination and innovation. The Hilari, who had once thought of themselves as the most advanced and powerful species in the galaxy, were now starting to question their own abilities in comparison to the humans. Even the Zelra, known for their nearly indestructible bodies, found themselves worried about the humans' resilience. They had never seen a species that could handle such extreme conditions with ease. The turning point came when the humans sent a message to the Galactic Council. It was brief, but it struck fear into the hearts of every leader who read it. "We're not here to fit into your galaxy. We're here to take our place. We'll do it our way. If you try to stop us, we'll fight." This declaration wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The humans had no intention of following the Council's rules. They had already proven that they were not like any species the galaxy had known. The message was clear. The humans weren't interested in alliances or peaceful coexistence. They weren't afraid of war, and they had already shown they could win. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long. Now, they were preparing for the inevitable conflict. The Starlight Legion, now growing stronger every day, had become a symbol of human strength and resilience. With their training on the dead worlds, they were ready for any battle, any threat. And as their ships began to move toward the heart of the galaxy, the once unshakable empires of the galaxy found themselves on the edge of a terrifying realization. Humans weren't just surviving the dead worlds, they were preparing to reshape the galaxy itself. The balance of power had shifted, and the galaxy's ancient powers could only watch in fear as the humans, unbroken and unbowed, began their march toward domination. The question no one could answer was this: would the galaxy's old empires try to stop the humans, or would they be forced to bend to humanity's will? As the humans' forces expanded across the galaxy, the power dynamics had drastically shifted. The Starlight Legion, once a symbol of strength and resilience, now represented the beginning of a new era, an era where humanity was no longer seen as a weak species, but as one with the potential to dominate. Their relentless training on the dead worlds had turned them into a force that no one, not even the mightiest of galactic empires, could ignore. It wasn't just about military might anymore. It was about a new way of thinking, a mindset that thrived in the most hostile of environments. This transformation had caught the attention of the galaxy's leaders, but there was nothing they could do to stop it. The once feared empires, such as the Vrax, the Hilari, and the Zelra, found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew. Could they continue their reigns of power when faced with this new, unpredictable threat? Could they face an army that didn't fear death, that had survived in environments meant to destroy them? The answer came soon enough. The Galactic Council, now divided, was unable to come to any effective decisions. Some leaders called for diplomacy, while others demanded war. But before they could even agree on a course of action, humanity took matters into their own hands. General Larkin, the human commander who had led the Ironborn to victory on the Dead Worlds, knew that the galaxy would not welcome humans with open arms. The Council's indecision had proven that. So instead of waiting for permission or even acknowledgement, Larkin made a decisive move. With a fleet of human warships, designed from the same survival instincts honed on the Dead Worlds, he and his forces began a campaign of rapid conquest. They didn't attack every empire all at once, but chose their battles carefully. First, they struck at weaker, less established colonies on the outer edges of known space, swiftly overpowering them. As the Starlight Legion advanced, those colonies found themselves unable to resist. The humans had proven time and time again that they could survive and thrive in the worst conditions, and now that same relentless drive was being used to crush their enemies. These early victories only made the rest of the galaxy more fearful. Alien species that had once mocked humanity now saw their potential for total dominance. The fear spread like wildfire, and in the galaxy's darkest corners, whispers turned to shouts. The humans were coming for them, and there was no stopping them. The Starlight Legion moved faster than anyone could have anticipated. With each conquered world, their territory grew, and their soldiers became more feared. The once unthinkable, humans being the dominant force in the galaxy, had become a terrifying reality. The larger empires, such as the Vrax and the Hilari, tried to form an alliance against the humans. They gathered their fleets and prepared for war, but the humans were always one step ahead. General Larkin, with his uncanny knowledge of tactics honed from surviving the harshest environments, countered every attack. One by one, the galaxy's strongest military powers fell before the humans' might. And with each victory, the humans grew bolder, more confident in their power. The final straw came when the Galactic Council, in a last-ditch effort to stop the human advance, sent a massive fleet to challenge the humans. It was a fleet so large that it could wipe out entire worlds. But instead of retreating or showing fear, the humans stood their ground. The battle that ensued was fierce, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But when the smoke cleared, the humans stood victorious once again. It was a moment that marked the end of the old galactic order. No longer were humans the small, insignificant species they once were. They had earned their place in the galaxy, and they had done so by conquering not just planets, but hearts and minds. The message was clear to all. The humans had arrived, and they were not going anywhere. In the end, the galaxy realized that they could not just ignore humanity anymore. The humans had proven that no world, no environment, no force could break them. The Ironborn had been forged in the crucible of the dead worlds, and now the galaxy was theirs to reshape. The once powerful empires of the galaxy would have to learn to coexist with the humans, or face the consequences. The era of human weakness was over. The humans had shown that they could not only survive the dead worlds, they could rule them. And with this new power, humanity was ready to take on anything the galaxy could throw at them.